The shuttle docked with a soft thud, and Katie Monroe felt her stomach flip. Through the small window, she could see the massive curve of Nexus Station 12 stretching out in both directions. Lights blinked across its surface, like a city that never slept. This was it. Her first off-world assignment. She was 19 years old, fresh out of the engineering academy, and about to spend 6 months learning how to fix things that most humans had never even seen. Her mother had cried at the spaceport. Her father had hugged her tight and whispered that she should remember everything he taught her. Katie had nodded, not fully understanding what he meant at the time. The airlock opened, and she stepped into a wide corridor filled with beings she had only seen in training videos. A group of tall, blue-skinned Varani walked past, their long robes flowing behind them. 2 small, furry creatures she did not recognize scurried along the wall, chattering in a language that sounded like clicking stones. The air smelled strange, like metal and flowers and something slightly burned. Katie gripped her bag tighter and looked around for a contact. A man waved at her from near information kiosk. He was human, maybe late 20s, with short brown hair and a friendly face. He wore the same gray jumpsuit she had been issued, with the Earth Engineering course patch on the shoulder. "Katie Monroe?" he called out. She nodded and walked over to him. "Danny Vance," he said, shaking her hand. "I'm your supervisor for the next 6 months. Welcome to the edge of nowhere." Katie managed a small smile. "Thanks, it's bigger than I expected." Danny laughed. "Everyone says that. Come on, let me show you around before you start work tomorrow." They walked through the station for the next hour. Danny pointed out the important places: the human quarters, the main engineering hub, the food courts that served Earth-compatible meals, and the medical center. He also pointed out the places she should avoid. "Down that corridor is the Drullian district," he said, his voice dropping slightly. "Big lizard types. Mean as hell. They run most of the gray market stuff on this station. Best to just stay out of their way." Katie looked down the corridor. It was darker than the others, with fewer lights and more shadows. "They don't like humans?" "They don't like anyone," Danny said. "But they especially don't like us. We've only been part of galactic civilization for about 40 years. To species like the Drellians, we're newcomers. Weak, short-lived, not worth respecting." Katie frowned. "That doesn't seem fair." Danny shrugged. "Fair doesn't really exist out here. You just keep your head down, do your job, and don't give anyone a reason to notice you. That's how humans survive on stations like this." Over the next few days, Katie learned exactly what Danny meant. She saw how other species looked at humans. The Varani spoke to them slowly, as if talking to children. The insectoid Kalaris simply ignored them most of the time. And the Drellians, when they passed humans in the corridors, would sometimes bare their teeth in what might have been a smile but looked more like a threat. Katie kept her head down. She focused on her work, learning the station systems, fixing broken panels and faulty wiring. She was good at it. Her hands were steady, and her mind was quick. Danny said she was one of the best apprentices he had trained, but she noticed things. She noticed how the other human workers walked quickly through certain areas. She noticed how they avoided eye contact with the larger species. She noticed the small signs of fear that everyone tried to hide. It bothered her. But she said nothing. One evening, about 2 weeks into her assignment, Katie was walking back to her quarters after a late repair job. Danny had offered to walk with her, but she had told him she would be fine. The job had run long, and she did not want to keep him waiting. The corridors were quiet at this hour. Most of the station was in its night cycle, and only a few beings moved through the hallways. Katie walked quickly, her tool bag over her shoulder, her mind already thinking about sleep. She did not notice the figure watching her from a side corridor. Varax. Keth was a Drellian enforcer. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, with dark green scales and yellow eyes that gleamed in the dim light. He worked for one of the syndicates that controlled the station's underground economy, and he enjoyed his job very much, especially the part where he got to remind weaker species of their place. He had been watching the new human girl for a few days now. She was small, even for a human. Quiet, always alone in the evenings. An easy target. Varax stepped out of the shadows and began to follow her. Katie heard the footsteps behind her. Heavy, slow, deliberate. She did not turn around. She kept walking, her pace steady, her breathing calm. She had heard footsteps like that before, back in New Detroit. Back in the industrial districts where she had grown up. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. Stay calm. Assess the situation. Never let them see you afraid. The footsteps grew closer. Katie's hand drifted to her tool bag. Inside, among the wrenches and circuit testers, was a heavy metal pry bar. She had carried one since she was 14 years old. The corridor ahead was empty. No witnesses. No security cameras that she could see. This was not an accident. Whoever was behind her had chosen this spot carefully. Katie took a slow breath and kept walking. Varax, Keth smiled, his teeth glinting in the low light. The little human had no idea what was about to happen. This would be fun. He quickened his pace, closing the distance between them. Katie heard him getting closer. 10 feet, 8 feet, 5 feet. She stopped walking. Varax stopped too, surprised for a moment. Then he laughed, a low rumbling sound. Smart little creature, he said in broken common. You know when you are caught. Katie turned around slowly. She looked up at the massive Drellian, her face calm, her eyes steady. She did not speak. Varax stepped closer, looming over her. Give me your tools. Your credits. Everything you carry. Do this, and maybe I let you walk away with only small bruises. Katie said nothing. She simply looked at him. Something flickered in Varax's eyes. Annoyance, maybe. Or confusion. Humans were supposed to cower. They were supposed to beg. This one just stood there, watching him like she was waiting for something. You do not understand? Varax growled. He reached down and grabbed the collar of her jumpsuit, lifting her until her feet barely touched the ground. Let me make it simple for you, little prey. Katie looked into his yellow eyes, and she smiled. Word spread through Nexus Station 12 like fire through dry grass. By morning, everyone knew what had happened in Corridor 7 Alpha. A human girl had put a Drellian enforcer in the medical ward. A Drellian enforcer who had terrorized the lower districts for years. And she had done it in 4 seconds. The footage leaked within hours. Someone in the security department must have shared it. Katie did not know who, and she did not care. But suddenly, everyone on the station had seen the video. They watched the massive Drellian grab the small human by the collar. They watched her hands move faster than eyes could follow. They watched him fall. They watched it again and again. Danny Vance found Katie in the engineering bay that morning. She was working on a broken power coupling, her hands steady, her focus complete. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching her. She looked exactly the same as she had the day before. Calm, quiet, small. You could have told me, he said finally. Katie looked up. Told you what? Danny walked over and leaned against the workbench. That you can fight like that. That you grew up in New Detroit. That your father was a boxing instructor. He paused. I did some research this morning. Katie shrugged and went back to her work. It never came up. Never came up? Danny shook his head. Katie, the whole station is talking about you. The Drellians are furious. Their enforcer is eating through a tube, and a human girl put him there. This is not a small thing. Katie set down her tools and looked at him. I know it's not small, but what was I supposed to do? Let him hurt me? Let him take what he wanted? No, Danny said quickly. No, of course not. I'm not saying you were wrong. I'm just saying things are going to be different now. For you, for all of us. He was right. Katie saw it as the day went on. Other humans looked at her differently. Some with surprise. Some with respect. Some with something that looked almost like hope. For years, humans on the station had kept their heads down. They had accepted the insults, the dismissive looks, the casual cruelty of larger species. They had survived by being invisible. Katie had refused to be invisible. And now everything was changing. In the medical ward, Varax Keth lay in a specialized bed designed for Drellian bodies. His jaw was held together with metal pins and healing gel. Tubes ran into his throat, feeding him a liquid mixture that would keep him alive while his body healed. He could not speak. He could not eat. He could barely move. Helirix, the Drellian physician assigned to his case, stood beside the bed with a grave expression. The damage is extensive, he said to the figure standing in the shadows. The jaw will heal, but it will take months. The throat trauma is more concerning. There may be permanent damage to his voice. The figure stepped forward into the light. Torvax Prime was the largest Drellian on the station. He stood over 8 feet tall, with scales so dark they were almost black. He was the leader of the syndicate that Varax worked for, and he was very, very angry. Show me the footage again, he said. Healer Urix activated a small projector. The corridor scene played out on the wall. Torvax watched it without moving. He watched the human girl get grabbed. He watched her strike. He watched Varax fall. Again, he said. The footage played again, and again, and again. Finally, Torvax turned away. How is this possible? He asked quietly. She is tiny, fragile, human. How did she do this to one of my best enforcers? Healer Urix hesitated. I have studied human physiology, he said carefully. They are not as fragile as they appear. Their muscles are denser than ours. Their bones are reinforced by years of living in higher gravity. And they have been fighting each other for longer than our species has existed. Torvax's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Humans evolved on a harsh world, the healer explained. They had to fight predators, survive extreme weather, and compete with each other for resources. They've been at war, in one form or another, for their entire history as a species. Fighting is in their blood. It is part of who they are. Torvax looked back at the frozen image on the wall. The small human girl, standing over his fallen enforcer. I want to know everything about her, he said. Everything about humans and how they fight. Find me this information. In the human quarters, the mood was different. Word of what Katie had done had reached every human worker on the station. They gathered in small groups, talking in low voices. Some were worried about retaliation. Others were proud. All of them were surprised. An older woman named Linda Chun, who worked in the station's hydroponics bay, found Katie in the cafeteria that evening. She sat down across from her without asking permission. You're the girl from the video, she said. Katie nodded. Linda studied her for a long moment. I've been on this station for 12 years, she said. In all that time, I've watched humans get pushed around, insulted, threatened, sometimes worse. We all learn to just take it, to survive. She leaned forward. But you didn't just take it. You fought back. Katie looked down at her food. I didn't have a choice. We all have choices, Linda said. Most of us choose to be afraid. You chose something different. She reached across the table and touched Katie's hand. Thank you. Katie did not know what to say. She had not done what she did for anyone else. She had done it because she refused to be a victim. Because her father had taught her that strength was not about size or species. It was about the will to survive. But looking around the cafeteria, she saw other humans watching her, nodding to her, standing a little straighter. Maybe it did matter. Maybe it mattered more than she knew. That night, Danny walked her back to her quarters. This time, she did not argue. They walked in silence for a while, through corridors that seemed less threatening than before. "Commander Vaughn called me today," Danny said finally. Katie looked at him. "What did she say?" "She said I should keep an eye on you. She said the Drellian Syndicate is not going to let this go. Torvax Prime is gathering information, planning something." Katie felt a cold feeling in her stomach, but she pushed it down. "Let them plan. I'm not hiding." Danny stopped walking and turned to face her. "Katie, these are dangerous people. Varax was just an enforcer. There are worse than him in that syndicate. Much worse." Katie met his eyes. "I know, but running won't change anything. If they come for me, they come for me. I'll deal with it the same way I dealt with Varax." Danny stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly. "You really aren't afraid, are you?" Katie thought about the question. She thought about her father, about the streets of New Detroit, about all the fights she had survived. Fear was a luxury she had never been able to afford. "I'm always afraid," she said quietly. "I just don't let it stop me." They reached her quarters. Katie opened the door, then paused. "Danny? Yeah? Thank you for walking me home." Danny smiled. "Anytime. Get some sleep. Tomorrow might be interesting." Katie closed the door and leaned against it. Her hands were shaking again. Just a little. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Tomorrow would definitely be interesting. Varax Keth had grabbed many beings by the collar in his life. Varani merchants, Kelari workers, even a few of his own kind who had stepped out of line. They all reacted the same way. Fear, panic, begging. The human girl smiled at him. For a moment, Varax felt something strange. A small cold feeling in his stomach that he did not recognize. He pushed it away. This creature weighed nothing. She was tiny, soft, breakable. There was nothing to fear from something like this. "You think this is funny?" he growled, shaking her slightly. "You think Varax Keth is a joke?" Katie did not answer. Her mind was very quiet now, very calm. She had been in this exact situation before, many times. Different faces, different places, but always the same moment. The moment when someone bigger and stronger thought they had won. Her father had taught her to fight when she was 8 years old. Not for sport, not for fun, for survival. The industrial districts of New Detroit were not kind to the weak. By the time she was 12, she had broken her first nose. By 14, she had put a grown man in the hospital. By 16, she had stopped counting. The Drellian did not know any of this. How could he? To him, she was just another soft, helpless human. Katie's eyes moved quickly, taking in everything. His grip was on her collar, his arm extended. His other arm hung at his side. His neck was exposed. His jaw was forward, chin up, the classic posture of someone who had never been hit in the face. She had maybe 2 seconds before he did. Something worse. Katie moved. Her right hand came up fast, palm open, and struck Varax directly in the throat. The blow was precise, hard, aimed at the soft tissue just below his jaw. She felt cartilage crunch under her palm. Varax made a choking sound. His grip on her collar loosened. Katie did not stop. She could not stop. Her father's voice was in her head. "When you start, you finish. No hesitation. No mercy." Her elbow came around in a tight arc, smashing into the side of Varax's jaw. The impact traveled up her arm, and she felt bone crack. Not hers. His .vor Rax stumbled backward, his hands going to his face. Blood was already pouring from his mouth. His eyes were wide with shock and pain. He tried to speak, but only a wet gurgling sound came out. Katie stepped forward. She grabbed the back of his head with both hands and drove it into the corridor wall. The sound was loud in the empty hallway. A wet thud followed by a crack. Varax slid down the wall and collapsed on the floor. He was still breathing, but he was not moving. His jaw hung at a wrong angle. Several teeth lay scattered on the ground around him. Blood pooled beneath his head. The entire fight had lasted 4 seconds. Katie stood over him, breathing hard. Her hands were shaking now. They always did after a fight. She looked down at the Drellian, at the damage she had done, and felt nothing. No guilt. No fear. Just the cold emptiness that always came when the danger was over. She bent down and picked up her tool bag, which had fallen during the struggle. Then, she stepped over the unconscious body and walked a few feet down the corridor. She found a small alcove with a communication panel and pressed the emergency button. "Station security," a voice answered. "What is your emergency?" "There's been an incident," Katie said. Her voice was steady, calm. "Lower Commercial District, Corridor 7 Alpha. A Drellian male attacked me. He's unconscious and needs medical attention." There was a pause on the other end. "Did you say a Drellian attacked you? And he's unconscious?" "Yes." Another pause. "Stay where you are. Security is on the way." Katie ended the call and leaned against the wall. Her hands were still shaking. She looked at them, at the blood on her knuckles, and took a slow breath. The shaking would stop soon. It always did. 10 minutes later, the corridor was filled with security officers and medical personnel. The Kelari officers moved quickly, securing the area and scanning for other threats. The medical team worked on Varax, checking his vitals and stabilizing his injuries. One of the officers, a Toptelore with compound eyes that reflected the corridor lights, approached Katie. "You are the one who called this in?" Katie nodded. The officer looked at Varax, then back at her. His mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion. "You did this?" "He grabbed me," Katie said simply. "I defended myself." The officer stared at her for a long moment. Then he gestured for her to follow him. "Come with me. Commander Vaughn will want to speak with you." They walked through the station in silence. Katie noticed other beings stopping to stare as they passed. Word was already spreading. She could see it in their faces. Shock. Disbelief. Drellian enforcer had been taken down by a human girl. The security office was clean and well lit, a sharp contrast to the dark corridors outside. The officer led Katie to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. "Wait here," he said, and left. Katie sat down. Her hands had stopped shaking. She looked at the blood on her knuckles and wondered if she should clean it off. She decided to wait. It might be evidence. The door opened, and a tall Kelari entered. She wore a commander's insignia on her chest, and her compound eyes seemed to see everything at once. She sat down across from Katie and placed a data tablet on the table. "I am Commander Thizavorn," she said. "I am the chief of security on this station. I have watched the footage of what happened in Corridor 7 Alpha." She paused, her mandibles clicking softly. "I have watched it several times." Katie said nothing. Commander Vorn leaned forward. "The Drellian you fought is named Varax Keth. He is an enforcer for one of the syndicates that operates in the lower districts. He has a long record of violence and intimidation. Many beings on this station are afraid of him." She tapped the data tablet, and a holographic image appeared above it. The corridor footage. Katie watched herself get grabbed by the collar, watched herself strike, watched Varax fall. 4 seconds, Commander Vaughn said. You incapacitated a trained Drellian enforcer in 4 seconds. Katie met her eyes. He should not have grabbed me. Commander Vaughn was silent for a moment. Then she made a sound that might have been a laugh. No, she agreed. He should not have. She leaned back in her chair. The medical report just came in. Varak's Keth has a shattered jaw, broken in 3 places. 7 teeth destroyed. Significant trauma to his throat. Internal bleeding in his skull from the impact with the wall. He will survive, but he will be eating through a tube for many months. Perhaps longer. Katie nodded slowly. Okay. Commander Vaughn studied her with those strange compound eyes. You do not seem surprised. Or upset. I'm not, Katie said quietly. He made a choice. He grabbed me. I made a choice too. The commander clicked her mandibles again. I have worked with humans before, she said. I know you are not the soft, weak creatures that many species believe you to be. But even so, this is impressive. Where did you learn to fight like this? Katie thought about her father. About the gym in the basement of their apartment building. About the endless hours of training, the bloody knuckles, the bruises that never seemed to fully heal. Earth, she said simply. I learned on Earth. Commander Vaughn nodded slowly. I see. She stood up and walked to the door. You are free to go. The footage clearly shows self-defense. But I suggest you be careful. Varak's Keth has friends. And they will not be happy about this. Katie stood up. I understand. She walked to the door, then paused. Commander? Yes? They should be careful too. Commander Vaughn watched the small human girl walk away. Her mandibles clicked thoughtfully. She had a feeling that things on Nexus Station 12 were about to change. 1 month had passed since the incident in Corridor 7 Alpha. Nexus Station 12 was a different place now. Not in any obvious way. The lights were the same. The corridors were the same. The thousands of beings from dozens of species still went about their daily lives. But something had changed. Something that everyone could feel, but few could explain. Humans walked differently now. They kept their heads up. They met eyes with other species instead of looking away. They gathered in groups in the common areas, talking and laughing like they belonged there. Because they did belong there. They had always belonged there. It had just taken one 19-year-old girl to remind everyone of that fact. Katie Monroe had become something of a legend on the station. Not because she wanted to be. She still showed up for work every day, still fixed broken systems and faulty wiring, still kept to herself most of the time. But beings she had never met nodded to her in the corridors. Species that had once ignored humans now stepped aside to let her pass. She was not sure how she felt about it. Fame had never been something she wanted. But she could not deny that things were better now. Not just for her. For all the humans on the station, Danny had been promoted to senior supervisor. The engineering department had received more funding and better equipment. Human workers were being assigned to important projects that had previously gone to other species. Small changes, maybe, but they added up. One afternoon, Katie was walking through the commercial district when she saw a familiar face. Or rather, a familiar figure. Varak's Keth was standing outside a supply shop, his jaws still held together by metal supports, a communication pad in his hands. He looked thinner than before. Weaker. His scales had lost some of their shine. Katie stopped walking. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Varak did something unexpected. He lowered his head slightly. A small gesture. A nod of acknowledgement. Not friendship. Not forgiveness. Just recognition. Katie nodded back. Then she kept walking, and Varak turned away. They would probably never speak. They would probably never be anything but strangers who had shared one violent moment. But that moment had changed both of them. had changed everything. That evening, Commander Vorn called Katie to her office. When Katie arrived, she found the commander sitting behind her desk with a data tablet in front of her. "Sit down," Commander Vorn said. Katie sat. "I have been reviewing security reports from the past month," the commander said. "Incidents involving humans have dropped by 70%. Assault cases are down. Robbery cases are down. Even verbal harassment cases are down." She clicked her mandibles. "It seems that word has spread about what happens when you underestimate an Earthborn." Katie did not know what to say, so she said nothing. "I have a proposal for you," Commander Vorn continued. "I would like you to work with my security department. Part-time. Training officers in recognizing and responding to human-involved conflicts. Teaching them about human psychology, human fighting instincts, human capabilities." Katie blinked in surprise. "You want me to train your security officers?" "I want you to help them understand," Commander Vorn said. "Most species on this station still see humans as weak, as prey. That perception is dangerous, both for humans and for those who underestimate them. If my officers understand humans better, they can prevent incidents before they happen. They can protect everyone more effectively." Katie thought about it. She thought about all the years she had spent fighting, all the pain, all the blood. The idea of using that experience to help others, to prevent violence instead of just surviving it, was strange, but not unwelcome. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll do it." Commander Vorn's mandibles clicked in what Katie now recognized as approval. "Good. We start next week." The first training session was held in a large room in the security complex. Katie stood at the front, facing 24 officers from 12 different species. They looked at her with curiosity, skepticism, and in some cases, barely hidden amusement. A small human girl teaching security officers about combat. It seemed like a joke. Katie let them look. Then she began. "Most of you think humans are weak," she said. Her voice was calm and clear. "You see our size, our soft skin, our short lifespans, and you assume we are easy targets. You are wrong." She activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air. The same images Commander Vorn had shown Torvax Prime. Wars, battles, training, survival. Humans evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. We fought predators with nothing but rocks and sticks. We survived ice ages. We crossed oceans in wooden boats. We climbed the highest mountains and walked across the hottest deserts. Not because we are the strongest or the fastest, but because we never give up. Because we do not know how to quit. She looked around the room. The amusement was fading from some faces. Curiosity was growing. When a human is cornered, something changes. We do not think. We do not hesitate. 200,000 years of survival instinct takes over. We become something else. Something that will do anything to survive. And if you are the threat, we will go through you to reach safety. She turned off the display. I am not special. I am not unique. Any human pushed far enough will react the same way. Your job is to recognize when a situation is escalating, to intervene before a human is pushed past the point of no return. Because once that happens, once the survival instinct takes over, someone is going to get hurt, maybe killed. She met the eyes of each officer in turn. Varax Kath grabbed me by the collar. He thought I was helpless prey. He spent the next month eating through a tube. Learn from his mistake. The room was very quiet. Over the following weeks, Katie taught more sessions. She showed the officers how humans moved, how they fought, how they thought. She taught them to recognize the signs of escalation. The way a human's breathing changed. The way their eyes focused. The way their bodies shifted into fighting posture. She also taught them about human kindness. about how the same species that could kill without hesitation could also show incredible compassion, about how humans would risk their lives to save strangers, even members of other species, about the strange contradiction that was humanity, capable of both terrible violence and tremendous love. The officers listened. They learned. And slowly, the attitude on the station continued to change. 6 months after her arrival, Katie stood in the same docking bay where her journey had begun. Her apprenticeship was complete. Danny had recommended her for advanced training on Earth, and she had been accepted. She was going home, but she would be back. Commander Vaughn had made her a standing offer. Whenever she wanted to return, there would be a position waiting for her. Teaching, training, helping bridge the gap between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. Danny stood beside her as she waited for her shuttle. "You know," he said, "when you arrived, I thought you were just another apprentice. Quiet. Keep your head down. Don't make waves." Katie smiled slightly. "I tried. You failed spectacularly." Danny laughed and shook his head, but in the best possible way. "You changed things here, Katie. You showed everyone what humans really are." Katie looked out the window at the stars. "We are not monsters," she said quietly. "We are not invincible warriors. We are just people who learned a long time ago that giving up means dying. So we don't give up, ever." She picked up her bag and walked toward the boarding gate. At the entrance, she paused and looked back at Danny. At the station that had become something like home. At all the beings who had learned to see humans differently. "Humans don't start fights," she said, "but we always finish them." Then she boarded her shuttle and flew toward Earth. Behind her, Nexus Station 12 continued to spin in the darkness of space. And the beings on that station, from 100 different worlds, continued to tell the story of the small Earthborn girl who had taught them all a valuable lesson. Never grab a human by the collar. You will regret it. 3 days after the incident in Corridor 7 Alpha, 2 Drellian enforcers walked into the engineering bay where Katie worked. They were large, even for their species, with thick scales and eyes that promised violence. They stood in the doorway, blocking the exit, and stared at the small human girl working at her station. Katie looked up and saw them. Her hands stopped moving, but her face remained calm. Danny noticed them a moment later. He stepped away from his workbench and moved toward Katie, placing himself between her and the Drellians. His heart was pounding, but he kept his voice steady. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The larger of the 2 Drellians, a scarred male named Gorix, smiled with too many teeth. "We are here to deliver a message. From Torvax Prime." Other human workers in the bay had noticed the confrontation. They stopped what they were doing and watched. Some looked afraid. Others looked angry. But none of them left. "What message?" Danny asked. Gorix pointed at Katie, the female. "She hurt one of ours. This cannot go without answer. Torvax Prime demands she come to the lower district and apologize, publicly, on her knees." Katie stood up slowly. "No." The Drellians looked at her as if she had spoken a foreign language. Gorix's smile faded. "You do not understand. This is not a request." "I understand perfectly," Katie said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I'm not apologizing for defending myself. And I'm not going anywhere with you." Danny felt a surge of fear and pride at the same time. He looked around the engineering bay. Other human workers were moving closer. Not running away. Moving closer. He saw Marcus Brown, a big man from Texas who worked on heavy machinery. He saw Jenny Powell, a former military engineer who had served in the Earth Defense Force. He saw Sam Ortiz, who looked small and quiet, but had grown up in the same kind of neighborhood as Katie. They were all watching, waiting. Gorix made a sound of disgust. "Foolish creatures." He stepped forward and shoved Danny hard in the chest, sending him stumbling backward. "Move aside, weak one." Danny caught himself against the workbench. His chest hurt where the Drellian had hit him. But before he could react, something happened that none of the Drellians expected. Marcus Brown stepped forward. His hands were clenched into fists the size of small hammers. Jenny Powell moved to flank the Drellians on the left. Sam Ortiz appeared on the right, holding a heavy wrench, and they were not the only ones. All around the engineering bay, human workers were moving, surrounding the two Drellians, cutting off their escape. Gorix looked around, his yellow eyes widening. For the first time, something like uncertainty crossed his face. "What is this?" "This," Danny said, straightening up, "is what happens when you push humans too far." Marcus cracked his knuckles. The sound was very loud in the sudden silence. "You touch him again, you're gonna need a lot more than a feeding tube." The second Drellian, younger and clearly more nervous, reached for a weapon at his belt. Before his hand got there, Jenny Powell was beside him. She grabbed his wrist and twisted. The Drellian gasped in pain and dropped to his knees. "Don't," she said calmly. "Just don't." Gorix stared at the scene in front of him. His partner was on his knees, held by a human female half his size. A dozen humans surrounded them, their eyes hard and angry. This was not how this was supposed to go. Humans were supposed to cower, to submit, to be afraid. These humans were not afraid. The door to the engineering bay opened, and Commander Vorn walked in with a squad of security officers. She took in the scene with her compound eyes and clicked her mandibles in what might have been amusement. "Is there a problem here?" Gorix straightened up, trying to regain his dignity. "These humans attacked us." "Really?" Commander Vorn gestured to a small device on her chest. "Because my body camera shows you shoving a human worker and your partner reaching for a weapon." "That looks like assault to me." The Drellians exchanged glances. They knew when they were beaten. "Take them to holding," Commander Vorn ordered. "I'll contact Torvax Prime myself." As the security officers led the Drellians away, Commander Vorn turned to look at the human workers. They were still standing together, a unified group. Not afraid. Not running. She clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. "Perhaps it is time I had a conversation with Torvax Prime about the nature of humans," she said. 2 hours later, Commander Vorn sat in a private meeting room across from Torvax Prime. The syndicate leader had come alone, which surprised her. He usually traveled with bodyguards. Today, he sat quietly, his dark scales gleaming in the artificial light. "You wanted to speak with me," he said. Commander Vorn activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air between them. "I want to show you something." The first image was of human soldiers in ancient armor, fighting with swords and spears. This is from approximately 3,000 years ago by human measurement. They called it the Battle of Thermopylae. 300 humans held a mountain pass against an army of over 100,000. Torvax said nothing. The next image showed trenches filled with mud and bodies. This is from a conflict they called World War I. Humans fought each other for 4 years. 20 million died. They kept fighting. More images, explosions, cities burning, soldiers charging into impossible odds. World War II, 70 million dead. They still kept fighting. The images changed to show humans training, boxing, wrestling, mixed martial arts. This is how humans prepare for violence. They practice it constantly. They refine it. They turn it into an art. Finally, she showed survival footage. Humans climbing mountains, crossing deserts, swimming through frozen water, fighting off animal attacks with their bare hands. Humans call their homeworld a garden. It is not. It is one of the harshest environments in known space. They evolved there. They survived there. Every single human carries 200,000 years of survival instinct in their blood. Torvax watched the images in silence. His face showed nothing, but his eyes were different than before. Something had shifted behind them. The girl who defeated your enforcer, Commander Vaughn continued. She is not special. She is average for a human. Any human pushed far enough will fight like that, will kill like that, without hesitation, without mercy. She leaned forward. Your enforcer grabbed her by the collar. He thought she was prey. He was wrong. All of your people who look at humans and see weakness are wrong. And if you continue to push them, you will learn that lesson the hard way. Torvax was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice lower than before. What do you suggest? Leave them alone, Commander Vaughn said simply. Find other targets for your intimidation. Other species who will cower and submit. Humans are not worth the trouble they will cause you. Torvax stood up slowly. He looked at the frozen images still floating in the air. The soldiers. The fighters. The survivors. I will consider your words, he said finally. He walked to the door, then paused. The girl. Katie Monroe. She is remarkable? Commander Vaughn shook her head. No, she is ordinary. That is what makes her dangerous. There are 8 billion more just like her on Earth, a million scattered across the galaxy, all of them carrying the same instincts, the same will to survive. Torvax left without another word. That evening, he called a meeting of his syndicate. His enforcers gathered in the dark halls of the lower district, waiting for orders, waiting for the command to strike back at the humans who had embarrassed them. Instead, Torvax gave them different orders. The humans are off limits, he said. All of them. From now on, we do not touch them. We do not threaten them. We do not even look at them wrong. Orcs, recently released from security holding, stepped forward. But Torvax Prime, they humiliated us. They hurt Varax. We cannot let this stand. Torvax turned to look at him. His eyes were cold and hard. I have seen what humans are capable of. I have seen what happens when they are pushed. Varax grabbed one small female, and now he eats through a tube. Imagine what would happen if we went to war with all of them. He looked around the room at his enforcers. We would lose, badly, and I will not sacrifice this organization for revenge. The room was silent. Leave. The humans. Alone. No one argued.